ideas, and that music ought to somehow be represented in addition to the music that we might employ. And we are absolutely, we feel that component is perhaps the most sacred part of the film, even though it is often, by the time it gets to your TV set, not as present as it could be. It is so central to what lifts up and carries our message. And it's the way the news is delivered from us. And so all of these things kind of go into this process of how you do it, so that at the end, when we finish and we lock this and we look at the last episode online and we send the masters to PBS, it's your film. It's your film. And we're already deep into other films and are right now, but it's your film. And so what the purpose of it is what you can get out of it. I just wish to engage the incredible gift of your attention to what we're going to do, and we hope to reward that gift of your attention with something that is satisfying.
The stories are riveting. I know the whole audience is rapt hearing you talk about them, and when combined in the film with the music and the structure, it's an extraordinary work of art, and it is based on the stories from the ground up. And at the same time, you're telling the story of the American idea. And some have described the American idea as liberty, equality, and democracy. Lincoln distilled it in his famous fragment about the Declaration to the words, liberty for all. Emerson called the American idea emancipation. I'm just as good as you be. Ken, what is the American idea?
Well, all of those things attract me, I think. I mean, you brought it up in your speech. I've said it. We tend to think in binaries about everything. We also forget that it's all process. What Sarah was describing is process. And not only subscribing to it, but succumbing to it, honoring it, and following it through. So when you say pursuit of happiness, we're all focused, well, what does happiness mean? We believe, most of our audience knows, that it's not the acquisition of objects in a marketplace of things, but as we described, lifelong learning in a marketplace of ideas. That's what they all meant. If you think it's things, you've missed the point, but it is lifelong learning. The key word is pursuit. Just as a more perfect union implies a process in which there may not be an end thing. Perfection is impossible, but you have to, the Shaker said it, put your hands to work and your hearts to God, and then you know which way. As we've had long discussions about deism, which is a philosophy, a religious philosophy subscribed to most notably by Thomas Jefferson and at times others of the founding group. And it essentially believes that God is disinterested in the affairs of men. He has not, or she has not, or whatever, has not had you hit into a game-ending double play or hit the game-winning Grand Slam home run. It just doesn't work this way. It is our obligation as human beings and as citizens in this new improved version of how human beings configure themselves to make ourselves worthy, to move towards that light. Still a disinterested supreme being, architect, divine providence, supreme architect of the universe, however you want to do it. And it's a wonderful, almost existential thing. It forces it back on me, not my thing all being determined by someone else, but what do I do? It is, why am I here? What is my purpose? How will I leave things? And then that has its own animating spirit. So that's, to me, the United States. We have that declaration. We understand its failings. The guy who wrote it, who distilled a century of Enlightenment thinking into one sentence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. He owns hundreds of human beings. On November 19th, 1863, in the now quiet fields of Gettysburg. Lincoln travels there, listens to Edward Everett speak for 2 hours, and then speaks for 2 minutes. And it's 2.0. He's saying, look, we really do believe this, and helped give us, as he said, a new birth of freedom out of 269, 272, whatever you believe the correct count is, words, you know. Jefferson's is only a little bit over 1,300 words. It's spectacular. Our Constitution is only 4 pieces of parchment. I think still the shortest Constitution in Earth. It's just fantastic to think about the concision and the brevity and the preciseness of our attempts at this self-governing business and the liberation of individuals to pursue happiness.
So beautifully put, the right and the duty of the individual to pursue happiness through virtuous self-mastery and lifelong learning is the American idea as you express it, and personal self-government is necessary for political self-government. I shared your remarkable morning practice of reading from Tolstoy's Book of Wisdom and deeply engaging.
I felt like
with
the
wisdom.
Roberta Flack song, reading my, letters out loud. That was really.
I hope that was okay.
That was
They're worth reading, and it's very much in the Ben Franklin spirit of moral self-accounting and self-improvement through taking stock of your attempts to become more perfect. Were you inspired by Franklin? Tell us how you came upon the practice of Tolstoy, and what are other parts of your daily practice for self-improvement?
Well, the work is the thing. My girls are the thing. I mean, not necessarily in that order. That's the most important aspect of the daily life, is just feeling a kind of sacred responsibility and the best kind of obligation to 4 beings I've been part of creating. And then the work, the process, the ongoing work. I mean, and as Sarah said, we don't take breaks. We work all the time. And it's glorious and frustrating and I was approached by a man in New Hampshire who asked me if I'd read The Calendar of Wisdom by Leo Tolstoy. I had not heard of it. I'm a great admirer of Tolstoy's novels. He sent it to me, and I looked at it, and I saw what it was, and it's basically January 1st, and then there are 5 or 6, sometimes 7 paragraphs. If they're unsigned, that means that Tolstoy himself wrote it. If they're signed, you know who wrote it. And he draws from everything, as you heard, Confucius, Schopenhauer, Jefferson, the Bible, the Talmud, the Quran, Marcus Aurelius, who never wrote a bad word in his life. And then there's an italicized paragraph, which is sort of a signal, I think, to the central theme of the page. And my friend let me know that his son was dying and that he and his son were reading it every day. The son had moved to the West Coast for experimental treatment, and he wanted to know if I'd like to join this. I said, yeah, but I'm traveling all the time. I'm not schlepping this book around. So somewhere towards the end of January or early February of 2015, Robert photographed the page and sent it to me, which was such a lovely thing to do. And I responded to it, and then he responded back to me. And then when his son Greg woke up in Seattle, he would respond. And sometimes the father and son would engage in something, and then I might try to reconcile it all at the end of the day. And then the next day. And he gets up really early. It comes in, as you know, 5:30, 6. Today was a little bit late. In fact, I wrote him, I said, did you send it? So that's why, what did you say today?
6:33.
6:33, that's way late for the two of us. Greg died either April 30th or May 1st. We missed one day. And he said, would you like to continue? And I said, I need to continue. His wife had called us the Tolstoy Trio. And so that's what we still call it among ourselves. And so we continued. When we got to the end of the year, he just said, what do you think about doing it again? I said, let's do it. It's 365 entries, 366 entries, and you can't memorize them all. You can't but help have a completely new reaction every single time. And so we've just continued it, and after a while he started adding people. There's now more than, I don't know how many are on the list. He's got the list, I get mine, and I respond, and he publishes mine, and 3 or 4 people might respond that day, or one person, no other person. My friend Joe responded this morning with an even funnier thing about eating meat. So it just goes on, and we've just continued. He's got another parallel book, which for a couple of years we worked on that, and it's now, it's 9.5 plus years, and I can't imagine it. It's part of that daily discipline, like walking and like work, which is, a kind of salvation.
Well, I know that our friends will be as inspired as I am by the rigor and spiritual seriousness of your daily quest, and the obligation that each of us has to use each minute productively to learn and grow and improve ourselves. I couldn't watch that the highlight reel of your work without, first of all, wanting to watch all of those shows. Thomas Hart Benton, Jefferson. There's so much to learn from. And when you look back on the corpus of your work of telling the story of all of American history from the founding till today, abstractions are difficult, but what are some of the most important lessons that you want everyone to learn?
I made a film about the Statue of Liberty pretty early on. I think it's number 4 in that list. Vartan Gregorian, whose voice used to be the head of the New York Public Library, when I interviewed him, and he said it's not an actuality but a potentiality. I think I'd like people to think about us as that potentiality. He said that you need to see yourselves, to follow what you just said, not as economic units, but as spiritual beings. That would be a good lesson to have. Betty Carter, who says there wasn't a Saturday night when we didn't talk about killing Huey Long, later on as Long has grotesquely gotten into this power-hungry grab in both Louisiana and the United States Senate. People are referring to him as evil, and she goes, evil's a difficult word. We all have the worm in our apple. I'd like us to all remember that we have the worm in our apple. Jeff Ward, who has been our principal writer for so many years, sent me something at the beginning of this year. He was reading a book, I can't remember what, but somebody referred to I.F. Stone, the journalist who published a weekly. He was a fairly liberal guy, but it was read by conservative back in the time when everybody listened to everybody else. And he had an acolyte who was extraordinarily disappointed in Stone's admiration for Thomas Jefferson. And Stone just said to him, history is tragedy, not melodrama. In melodrama, all heroes are perfectly virtuous and all villains are perfectly villainous, but it is not like that. Later on in the Statue of Liberty, Saul Linowitz, the former ambassador, said, quoting Judge Learned Hand, and I can't think of anybody better name for a judge, sorry, Michael, than Learned Hand, that liberty is never being too sure you're right. And that has echoed down, reverberated down every film that I've made, I think. And that I came to an understanding that I coalesced in a speech I gave earlier this year, in which I said, the opposite of faith is not doubt. Doubt is central to faith. The opposite of faith is certainty. And we live in an age in which nearly everybody is in a hardened silo